Hot summer's night, would you offer your throat to the wolf with the red rose? And welcome back to the next edition of the Rancor Pit. So last time I talked about all of the beginnings and the origins of Erik Irons, a Kinfolk character that I made a long time ago that incorporated a lot of my earliest wantings to delve as deeply as I did into the storytelling world of White Wolf. And through this book, through the Unsung Heroes, published in, where is it? Year of the Ally, I delved. So after Erik had gone to Japan with the Alpha of the Black Spiral Dancer Pack that he was a part of, called the Necro, and they had all of their huge falling outs in character, and she tried to have Erik killed. After Erik had given her triplet daughters. They were like babies by that time. The Alpha tried to have him killed. Now, out of character, not only did the player of the Alpha and I, combined with the rest of the pack, have a bit of a falling out, like out of character. She had a lot of things she had to go do in the real world, so she said, I'm basically going to retire her. This is what I'm just going to have happen to let you be released from the storyline, from the actual storytellers, and you can go play them however you want to. And I said, okay, I can deal with that. And we just had a almost murder situation. So he came back to the Necropolis, and I spoke about this. He came across, first person he actually came across was one of the other Kinfolk that was named Christine Hathaway. And they had an okay relationship, you know, because they were both Kinfolk at the same BSD pack. And I had a couple of scenes with Christine, Erik did, and I didn't know quite what to do with them. Well, one of the other people that were part of a fellow BSD pack in the Unmods came to me in private messages and PMs and said, hey, I remember that character. Did you want to do something for a storyline? I said, all right, I just have him bumming around, so why not? So it ended up that Erik came back, and I don't know why I was just basically elected to run the scene. I hadn't run anything while Erik was in the pack, and I wasn't an NST back then. But she said, you want to run something for Erik? I said, okay. So she took over for the initial part of it, and then I started to take over for the rest of the actual storytelling later on. And Erik, I basically wrote him into the beginning scene of him coming back and going back to one of his favorite nightclubs. It was this dirty little dingy like pool hall dive that I nicknamed Black Dog Billiards. It's a joke because if you play World of Darkness, specifically Werewolf of the Apocalypse, you know that Black Dog is actually the evil megacorporation company, Pentex's publishing company. It's a subsidiary of the major like big Wyrm entity in existence. It's kind of a joke, but whatever. So I had him go back to where it was, and it wasn't a pool dive anymore. It was music. It was more cleaned up. It was refined. It wasn't quite a nightclub, but it definitely wasn't what he left it. So he goes in, tries to play a game of pool, gets into a scrap match with one of the guys that tried to cheat him. And then this other player's character came in, and they had a whole, huge reconnecting scene because they vaguely remember each other. And then there was a whole explanation of what happened. So as an Alpha herself of what was her old pack, she said, okay, you're a Kinfolk, you've got nowhere to go, you don't know anybody else, and everybody in the city has fled. There are no more BSD packs, the Gaians all kicked us out. You're coming with me whether you like it or not. So that started a whole huge storyline plot of this packless Alpha, as it were, taking a Kinfolk for her own. Well, it turns out that the pack that she was a part of, that Alpha was not her. That Alpha was an extremely sadistic, brutal, and very, very much devoted to father, male guru, Trueborn, and he hated, anybody else in his world except for her. So it turned out that that whenever Erik had babysat the little kids, the little like kinfolk and whatnot, he also babysat one of the Medises. That term is under great debate, depending on how you're going to pronounce, how you choose to pronounce it. Metis is what it's spelled like. If you have any French Creole or French Canadian influence in your life at all, you see Métis. Well, I didn't. So I call it a metis, regardless. A metis is what happens whenever two true-born Garou break the rules, mate, and then have a child. It's a child that is born in their war form. Now, they're not born as a 7-foot, teeth and claw killing machine. They are born as that killing machine, just in micro variety, but instead of being born, they usually claw the way out of the mother. It's rather brutal. He had babysat one of the Metis kids that was around the other pack way back in the day, and that's how she remembered him. Well, we had wrote the story that character, who her name was Mis, M-I-S. Her full name was Misery. That was the name she was given whenever she crawled out of the hive spiral, and she was a Black Fury Trueborn. And that's like Greek and Roman and very matriarchal society kind of Trueborn. And we wrote it that her son, Griffin, had grown up a bit. The problem with dealing with Metis age is that you kind of have to go off of dog years, which is, you can argue the finer points of it all you want to, but it's basically 7 years, right? So every 7 years you have to consider it 1 year, so he was basically like 1 year old technically, well, kind of 7, because you're a lupine, you're a wolf, but we wrote it that he was basically 1 year old, and he fell in love with Erik because Erik was a kin, but he didn't take any real abuse anymore after almost being killed by his own alpha and his own lover, and having to abandon by force his daughters in Japan. Erik became really, really hard-nosed, almost like a death wish, like a Charles Bronson kind of mentality, that if you really want to kill me, you have your opportunity. The problem is, Erik packed a very high-caliber revolver with solid silver bullets in it, and he became very good at shooting that, and he still had his bat, which, Trueborn or not, could still break your bones, because it did lethal damage, right? You can kill a werewolf with lethal damage. So he'd become very hard-nosed, very, very gritty whenever he came back, and that's just how I ran him. So Griffin liked him because he was like that, because Griffin's father was extremely dark and sadistic and brutal and brutalizing and horrible. And that was hard for him too, because he had lost his pack, all of his followers, and his connection to father. Because he had no pack, he had no totem, he had no real connection to father, so he was screwed too. So it was him and his mate, which was another Garou, and there met his son, which he cared for, but in a twisted way. Not in a pervy way. I mean twisted, like he was bringing him up to be just like him. Kind of twisted, like a twisted upbringing almost. It's a flaw. And for werewolves, you can take it. That you're raised wrong, and you're taught wrong things, and then you think it becomes the norm after that. So, yeah. I basically sometimes NPC played Janos, which was the father of Griffin. Sometimes the other player played it, so that we could like co-story tell the scene where it became really, really this wonderful like symbiotic bubble, and eventually Janos went way, way off the deep end at one point, and it was because of Erik, because of his incisiveness to be a rebel against what was supposed to be the rules for a kinfolk, and he and Erik got into it after he like brutalized Misery, and which he did for fun on a regular basis. So Erik snapped. He carried a Smith & Wesson 500, a long barrel. Well, that's 5 bullets. That's six lethal apiece, and they were all solid silver. Erik put him down. Shot him right there in the bedroom, literally, as the deed was going down after he'd already been hit a whole bunch of times and clawed once. He put Janos down, so we ended that chapter of the storyline that they were under his thumb, and there was a whole like liberation thing. And then Erik and Misery and Griffin, they moved to the only safe place that Erik knew, which was Mexico, because after he had graduated from public school in Boston, and like I said, he became a bounty hunter, he did a lot of off time in Tijuana and the like. So he would do all of his business in the U.S., and then for a couple of weeks, a month, he just disappeared down in Mexico. So he spoke the language fluently, he knew where he was going, and it wasn't just TJ, it wasn't just border towns, it was a whole bunch of other places in Mexico. So they chose one that was much deeper in the Mexico, the area. It wasn't always just border towns, it was farther than that, it was far deeper into the country. So he chose a safe location, and there for a while it was okay, but Erik's past started to crop up, because he got into trouble. He was a troublemaker. He was a bounty hunter. So he sometimes busted people that were mixed in with the cartel. So I wrote that into the storyline that they started to come after him and his family, and he had to deal with that too. So then I had them, basically after that storyline was done, I had them move back to Necropolis since it had been, a year, and Misery was pregnant again. But it was by Erik. So there was a chance he was going to be a trueborn or it was going to be a kin, but it wouldn't be a metis. It wouldn't be a half-breed that was sterile, because all metises are all sterile, and they all had this like weird deformity to their bodies. So she became pregnant again, and they became a lot more than just traveling companions or lovers. They became something more. So when they moved back to Necropolis, Erik basically pulled all of his money that he had, and Misery sold the club because it wasn't bringing anything at that point. And they bought a nice apartment, and Erik went back to bounty hunting, just in Necropolis in basically New York State. So there for a while it was that, and they were okay. And then she had the baby, and the baby was Angel or Angelica. And from that storyline, I spawned it that a lot of dark things began to happen, because by this point I was S-Team solely. It was all me by this point. I professed that at that point it was time to mix things up, and I created a group of 6 shape changers, all different shape changers. It was a worm corrupted Grawl, a werebear, a worm corrupted Ratkin, a worm corrupted Rokea, a wereshark, worm corrupted Nuisha, I think it was. Yeah, because he ran everything, and there's a couple of Guru in there too. And they basically had begun to take over things, so they kicked all the BSD out that they didn't want to keep it like for their own lackeys and whatnot. And they put the vampires all in check because they started to just kill vampires en masse, rather than like do deals with them and stuff. So they were taking over Necropolis again. So I put that into play as a storyline plot hook, and they heard about Misery or remembered Misery, one of the two, and they heard about Erik. But by this point, Erik was beginning to realize that he was becoming more and more useless with all of these huge, like, dark dangers propping up. And now he had a family, right? So when these things cropped up, it was like, you're a kinfolk, you're going to die. You can't go up against a trueborn. They'll shred you. They'll change shape to Krynos and just shred you with their claws, and you're dead. So that's when Erik started to really delve into some darker things. The skull that he had with all the runes on it, he stopped using it because it was so taxing, but he still had it. So in a process, he had to basically consume the bane, the dark energy that was inside of it, in order to get a translation on a very dark, like, tome of information. And he found out something that he shouldn't have, that Kin should not ever find out, is that there was, in werewolf lore, there was one kinfolk named Joseph Haight, H-A-I-G-H-T, and he also didn't want to be, like, he thought he was cheated. He thought that guy or father, whatever you want to call it, he thought that he was cheated and should have been a trueborn. He was just a kin. He was a Kiktor. He was a broodmare. So he thought he was really cheated, so he decided to do something about it. So he did a lot of really dark pacts and found some dark information. And Joseph Haight was the first one to create the skin dancing extension of everything. The problem with that is the ritual, in order to do that, you have to skin five trueborn Guru. You have to skin them, preferably in their war form and in their Krynos state. And Joseph Haight did it. some time ago. And when he did it and he completed the ritual, he put on that, like, Frankenstein skin. In the ritual, it bonds to you. You become the shape changers that you killed. It bonds with what you are as a kinfolk and makes you a shape changer, but in the wrongest, worst, most darkest, sinister possible way, because you changed the natural order of Gaia. And this was dark, this was twisted, you know. Erik found that. But Erik also found out what his heritage was in the process. Remember how I said that I didn't want to be racist in his description, but he was as white as you can get, and so was his mother? That's because I also wrote into his backstory, unbeknownst to him, that his father was a great and at least Eastern world, like the Eastern hemisphere of the world, known genocidal madman and tyrant known as Blacktooth. And that was actually a Simba that had gone, a werelion, that had gone way far corrupted and started killing everybody around him in order to keep order. And then in that storyline, there was the coalition to stop him. And they eventually killed him. Well, Erik found out where his roots actually lied. He was basically half African. And he found out his middle name, or rather his real birth name, was Adebisi. Adebisi was something I looked around and chose. And Erik is just what his mother gave him. And he found out in order for this ritual to go through, he'd have to skin 5 Simba. It took a bit, and he did it underneath Misery's nose, which was the worst part. But in his travels and his bounty hunting, he found 5 Simba. And he skinned him. And he went through the ritual, and he became a skin dancer, which means you get to shape change, you get rage, you get the connection to Luna, you get gnosis, you get the connection to the earth, to the spirit world, but you're wrong. You'll always smell wrong. You look wrong, you know. Nothing about you is right. And even some black spiral dancers look at you like you've gone mad, you know. So he became that, and he could further protect his family, but it wasn't until after several beatings and a few different kidnappings and threats to his family that he finally went through with it, because it was serious. It was life-changing. The rules are there. I followed the rules in order for it to happen. And considering all he went through, it made sense. Well, after that, they knew they needed real help after Sigma 6. That group was finally, you know, mostly dispatched, or at least broken. So they went to another character of mine, which means I had to double then too. They heard about this old bear in the woods that used to help people all the time. Well, they had already tried to move to get away from him, but the members of Sigma 6 always found them, put them back into danger. So yeah, they went to John. They found Johnny. And by this point, Misery had gone like a switch. They had gone Ronin. They had left everything that they considered sacred, even if it was dark sacred. And she began to see the folly of being a BSD. She was actually born a guy, and she was born a Black Fury. She just became a BSD because they threw her in the pit at like age 10. So there was this huge like gray area when they were in John's company. John, you could say he seized on an opportunity, but that's what Geralt do. They find the best opportunity for something to work, and they take it. He became a mentor to her, a father figure, because she didn't have a father. So the fact that he was huge, the fact that he was powerful, he was very wise and older, and commanded a great deal of respect from everybody who dealt with him. She kind of latched onto him, and she kind of became his adopted father, or adopted daughter rather. And that storyline was huge because I expanded it and let it run a long time for her re-education. They had a cabin in the woods like a mile from where the ranger station was that was quiet. It was, you know, segregated from everything. And then every now and then I would just have things crop up or come back or whatever out of the warded lands. And they grew into different characters by then. Well, when I had John retire, because there was only so much I could do with the poor guy. I had ran John so long. That's when I fully like jumped back into what I had in my NPC chest, and I said, hey, here's Juniper, here's his first son, the triplets that he had. I said, he could take over John's position. It works. So that's what I had. I had John retire, take time, his wife time's remains, and go to a cave and literally do what Geralt do. At a certain point, they just go to sleep. They don't die, they just go to sleep. Until such time as something's going to, catastrophic's going to wake them. So I started to play Juniper. It was more like a brother, And because he was younger, they had a lot of good interactions for storyline stuff. And then that spawned Eric's, right-hand woman, as it were, not man, right-hand woman, his computer expert, to join the storyline too. And then, she ended up being played by somebody. So yeah, Eric's storyline was massive and spanned almost everything that the World of Darkness had to offer, from Kinfolk to Black Spiral Dancers to Trueborn Gaians to all of the Ferris shape changes to vampires to everything, and it spanned, two different countries. And Eric was a lot of fun to play. The saddest thing was when he had to get rid of the skull in order to go through with the ritual. He needed help, and when he went through to get help, they took his bat and they destroyed it, because those things are made for Kinfolk. You're not a Kinfolk anymore. So I was like, oh crap. But no, I still have him. But honestly, he's been through so much throughout the years. What do you do? I mean, I talked to my other player, and I was like, what do you want me to throw at him this time? I mean, what haven't they gone through? So inevitably, we started playing their kids. You're like, very much backburnered all of the adults and started playing with the kids, because honestly, what the hell are you gonna do? So we had to have like some separation between them, and they couldn't always get involved, or they were gone or whatever. Then we had the kids move, so they couldn't be involved with the parent, because the parents are problem solvers, right? So anyway, I'll conclude this video with telling you a secret about who the other player was. Unbeknownst to me, until because she had played some of the characters from the old BSD packs in Necro that Eric had involvement with, and I didn't know it. And I didn't find out it was the same person until, like, whenever I had Eric come back. And that's when she said, oh, yeah, I remember this character. Do you want to, do a storyline? We'll start off in Black Dogs. I didn't find out until that was the same player. And then I didn't really find out who it was until after that, whenever the storyline really started to pick up steam and take off. And that the player is somebody special to me. It's Kaylee. It's my wife. We weren't together back then. We were long distance friends, and it's her. So that was the coolest thing ever, that I got to play that kind of a hugely engrossing, multi-step storyline, multi-generational storyline with my best friend at the time. And we still, occasionally reference something from the storyline, or see something in a movie or a show or something that somebody says on TV and say, hey, wasn't that kind of like, or what that reminds me of? And we always reference back to them, because that storyline spanned years, So yeah. So yeah, Misery was Kaylee, it's still awesome to me. So anyway, I'll go ahead and wrap this video up. We ran long, but that's okay, because Eric's storyline is long. I haven't quite decided what I'm going to do next for next video. I may stick with White Wolf, or may jump back to something else. I haven't quite made my mind. So anyway, if you liked the video, give it a thumbs up. Much appreciated. And if you're new, cool, subscribe. And share it out to the rest of the gaming universe. And if you guys have any questions, comments, or suggestions, go ahead and leave them down below. If you want to hear about something else or something more, let me know. Anyway, so until next time, guys, grab your dice and you roll initiative.